Hello and welcome to the German New Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Sell, and today I am joined by a guest speaker from Germany, Matt Johnson. In our discussion, we will be talking about brain involvement from the GNM perspective. What goes on in the brains? We'll talk about brain tumors, headaches, and migraines as well. This call was recorded over Skype, so the audio isn't 100% perfect, but the message comes through loud and clear. Please keep in mind that the GNM podcast is intended for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. And welcome, Matt Johnson, to the German New Medicine podcast. Matt, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then how you got into GNM.
Yeah, hi Melissa. Thank you for having me on your podcast. So I'm from Germany. I'm 27 years old now, and I'm an electrical engineer at Siemens. So since 5 years already, and I got to know the German New Medicine probably 4 years ago now. Actually, when I met my girlfriend, when I met her, she told me that she has some sort of disease, and one day she just told me that she went to doctors in the past a lot, and they always told her, "Oh, you got only to live so many months, like 3 months or 9 months," and this never was true. And she just stopped from one time to go to the doctors because it was just, it bored her. It was just, I don't know, just lies what they told her. So they found actually a brain tumor inside of her head, and that gave her a lot of blackouts in the past and a lot of headache for sure. So when she told me that, I was actually kind of surprised that such a young girl can have such tumor inside her brain. And I did some research and suddenly came across some book from Dr. Hammer, where he actually described, I think, almost the same conflict. She tried to tell me what she experienced in the past, and it was a sort of a sexual conflict. And I never actually saw her brain scan, but I just can figure how big it could have been, because she had a lot of blackouts in the past, especially when there were stressful situations. So when you're in this sympathicotona mode, the stressful mode. And I read this book, or I read through the lines, and Hammer actually described a lot of experience he had with patients, with youngers also, who had the same experience or conflicts in the past. And there were a lot of advices from doctor to tell her to do a surgery, either through the nose or just cut the head off, right? And she never wanted that, and she was always a person who doesn't really care about this too much, what the doctor said. She only cared about what her parents feel in that moment for her daughter, right? So, but I think now this was the best. I mean, it was her healing or her rescue, because she never really cared about herself. I mean, it sounds strange now, but the emotions and feelings, or the advices the doctors gave her, they weren't really touching her too deeply, so she could have still enough distance, right? And this was, I think, also one of the reasons why she actually survived it, because they said it's a glioblastoma stage 4, whatever. So, which is, according to the school medicine, I think they cannot heal this type of thing. They only can give you some pills where it might prolong your life, but nothing else. So, and I came across this book, as I said, and there was same situations described and experienced, and so I I showed it to her. See, what I've just found here is something from a German doctor who experienced that brain tumors are not leading to death necessarily, and so yeah, she listened to that. She also dealt with this topic and found out that yeah, it's true what he's saying, because it perfectly fit to her experience and to what she experienced and described and so forth. And yeah, from this time on, over the month, the blackouts, which were less occurring, and yeah, right now, after 4 years, she's perfectly fine. No headaches, no blackouts anymore. It's yeah, it's awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah, like you said, that's to find out a young woman has a brain tumor. That's a very terrifying experience to be told. And that's very good that she didn't, listen to the doctors and get scared by their prognosis and what they believe to be true about brain tumors. So that was hugely in her favor that she didn't, let their word carry the most weight for her experience, because that's typically what happens. And that is something I want to discuss with you today, is the brain involvement when it comes to GNM and understanding the 5 biological laws and what is happening in the brain, because it is the mediator between basically what's going on in our outside world and then what goes on in our inside world and the adaptations that the body is making. And so by understanding what goes on in the brain and how the brain is involved in literally every biological program, there's always brain involvement. So here we think that, a brain tumor is like an extra special bad kind of cancer. From the typical conventional medicine perspective, a brain tumor, I'd say, is probably one of the most terrifying from, an individual's perspective. And to understand exactly why, at what point a person gets diagnosed with a brain tumor, understanding headaches. And so yeah, that's what I really wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, and you also asked me about covering some of the history, how Dr. Hammer discovered those Hammer focuses, right? This is how we call it in English, right? So yeah, I probably can start with some historical background if you like. So the first Hammer focus he found was actually in 1982. So he kind of started researching around 1980, and he saw the first Hammer focus on a patient when they did a full scan on the organ side of the brain. The Hammer focus, by the way, derived from his opponents who called them the W's Hammer foci. But he experienced a lot of challenges in doing research on this foci as he discovered them, because in that time he only concentrated his work on cancer, and from German New Medicine there are also cancer equivalents available, so which you won't see in the organs so much. So it was not usual, if you get the diagnosis of any cancer, that the school medicine will perform a brain scan of you. So that's again something. So he had maybe the diagnosis in the organ, but there were no brain scan taken. Also in that time, brain scans were very expensive, and the devices were also very expensive. So, but he started with a topography, let's say a description of the different locations of those foci, But again, it was very difficult because sometimes Hammer saw focuses in the brain, which was actually referring to another conflict which was not diagnosed. So he had on the one side a diagnosis canceled, say, in the kidneys, and then he found actually two foci in the brain, or three. And then he said, yeah, so it was very hard for him to actually determine location of the different brain relays. Also, every Hammer foci or focus is only very good to see during the healing phase when there's an edema, when there's water inside of this focus, but not in the conflict active phase. Especially if you know that radiologists, they will use iodine contrast substance to lighten those how they call brain tumors up, and this is only possible in the healing phase. But in the conflict active phase, you have very sharp concentric rings, and those he found, but always the radiologists, they said these are just malfunctions by the brain scan. Plus, he had also, because as I said, they just said they are just WOs, things or artifacts, how they call it, of the brain scan. They had no support from these radiologists because they would not believe this theory. Plus, if they would have lose their jobs or got no more patients from the hospitals. So this was also another fight he had. And again, like I said, they only had done the brain scans when there was a diagnosis of brain metastasis or brain tumors. So, and then it's really funny. He did more research on the conflict active phase, which is then a sharp concentric ring, and then he went to Siemens, who's actually building those brain scans. Where I'm also working, but I'm not working in the medical sector. However, kind of funny. And with Siemens, they determined criteria where in the brain scan you can determine if it's really a malfunction of the brain scan, or how they call it, an artifact, or not. So they said that if they did a backup scan in the nuclear magnetic resonance system, and if this also show a concentric formation, then sure, this needs to be, or this is a Hammer focus. Or also, if the rings, the concentric rings, are dented in the brain scan, this points to a space-consuming lesion. So a big conflict shock event. And also, if the rings show a definite sign of clear, this also points to a real Hammer focus. Sometimes you had the concentric rings exactly in the middle of the brain, but in this case, or in the photo I said, in this case, this is really a malfunction. But they say if the rings are not exactly in the center of rotation of this brain scan, then this is also no artifact or malfunction. So again, they defined 7 criteria, and Hammer actually wanted to find these criteria to radiologists on multiple patients, but the conference were always postponed, and then it was just cancelled because there were a lot of opponents for his findings.
Wow, that's very interesting. I do want for the audience just to frame the understanding of what we're talking about. When there's a conflict, it affects the person at the level of the psyche, the brain, and the organ all at the same time. So a conflict shock occurs, and the psyche of the individual perceives whatever that danger is, and immediately there is an impact in a specific region of the brain. And so there's an impact in the brain, these concentric rings that can be seen on a CT scan. And so Dr. Hammer, the medical doctors, they actually kind of made a joke of it. Is that right? About the Hammer focus was more of something they made fun of him for thinking that was an actual impact in the brain. They just said, oh, that's an artifact. It's not an actual impact in the brain. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And so he was made fun of for his observation, and what he found was that, so during the conflict, so when the person is actively in the state of fear, where they're preoccupied with whatever has gone on in the brain, on the brain scan, it can be seen as concentric rings in a very specific region. And now the region of the brain that the impact is depends on what type of conflict is it. Is it some type of indigestible morsel conflict? Is it a separation conflict? Is it territorial? And so each different brain region controls the function of different organs. And so you can look at a brain scan, and I know that there are people who are trained to read the brain scans and can tell just by looking at it whether a person has a bleeding ulcer, or if they have a rash on their left leg, specifically based on what they can see in the brain scan, because there are criteria that you can look at and see, oh, this is, in conflict activity. Once a person resolves their conflict and goes into healing, the brain scan, the impact in the brain region, it fills with edema because all healing happens in a fluid environment. And so the brain swells. And like you said, that's when it's easier to see on the brain scan itself when there's edema in the region. And then the healing crisis is what happens halfway through the healing phase. And that's typically when a person has some type of event, some type of terrible migraine or a heart attack or a seizure. And the whole purpose of that is the sympathetic stress push to squeeze the edema out of the brain, out of the organ region, so that it can go back to normal. So that during the second half of the healing phase is restoration, where there's glial cells, and glia is basically the connective tissue of the brain. You could think of it as scar tissue, and it goes in to restore and repair the region. And that's what ends up getting diagnosed as a brain tumor, correct? Once it's already been restored with the glia.
Right, exactly. And one thing I want to mention, glia, as you said, it's a connectivity tissue like we have in other parts of our body too. It's simply the same and has the same work to do in the brain or in the body. And actually, brain tumors doesn't exist. This is what we found out, because they always say that there's tissue multiplying, but this glia is actually not able to get multiplied after birth. So it's actually only the conjunctive tissue. Yeah, as you said, it's the conjunctive tissue of the brain.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to think about in the context of, here we think that when we discover a brain tumor, so a person most likely has been having ongoing headaches, some kind of maybe blurry vision or neurological symptoms, and because we scan so much and more frequently, people will get diagnosed with these brain tumors, which from the GNM perspective, all it is essentially is it's a scab, it's a scar, it's the proof that something had gone on in the body, but now it's actually restored. And it's the major complications from getting diagnosed with the brain tumor. Wouldn't you say it's the fear, it's the panic, it's the additional diagnosis shocks that initiate other conflicts that can increase the problems for that individual?
I was talking about, the conflict, the diagnosis shock, where there's another conflict starting, which the school medicine says that's metastasis. So, and then they want to tell us that these cancer cells, they even transform. Like if you have something in the bone tissue, now it starts to transform to get a lung tissue, which is completely a different type of tissue in the body. So how can they move and how can they transform? Nobody can tell and nobody can explain because but they always tell these are metastases, right?
So the metastasis theory is very interesting because there's actually very little proof of it from the medical side. My understanding of it for many years is, the cancer is a certain malignant, terrible type of cancer, and the cancer cells break off, and they go through the bloodstream, and they go through the lymph, and then they take up residence in other parts of the body, in the brain, in the bones, in the lungs, and that's the understanding that the vast majority of people have regarding their cancer, and that's why they, even after they have their treatment, they almost never can have a true peace of mind, because years later, so many people are re-diagnosed with cancer. Oh, that cancer was never gone, they'll say, and it metastasized to other regions. And the evidence and proof for that is very minimal in the medical perspective. But from the GNM perspective, it makes perfect sense because it's additional conflict shocks that are occurring that are initiating new biological programs, whether it's a self-devaluation affecting the bones or the lymphatic tissue, a death-fright conflict from the conflict shock affecting the lungs, and they each have a very understandable cause, whereas in medicine, it's completely random, completely unexplainable how a breast cancer cell turns into, like you said, a bone tumor. How does that even happen? One is a cell addition and the other is a cell loss. And then with the brain, how could a cancer cell pass the blood-brain barrier is also another interesting thing to take into consideration.
Right, Melissa. And also, if people donate blood and they sometimes say, maybe the cancer cells moving through the blood or the lymph, but none of these blood gets tested for cancer cells. I mean, no one ever saw one cell in the blood, so they not can give evidence if the blood might be full of cancer cells because it's just not possible.
For most lay people, when it gets explained to them how metastasis happens, they think, there must be a clear mechanism, like there must be cancer cells in the blood. But like you said, if we don't look at blood tests or we don't look at donated blood to see if there's cancer cells in them. Also, the way that medicine tests for the presence of cancer, it's an indirect test, similar to like an antibody test. It's not direct observation of something happening. It's a test that says whether or not certain proteins are in a certain area, but it's not actual cells in a region. And I think that can be very misleading for people because they don't understand kind of the nuance of medical testing and how they come up with the answers that they come up with. And they think it's very straightforward and basic, that this cell breaks off and goes here, and then it causes a new cancer, a new problem. But that kind of simplistic understanding is very inaccurate. It's not biologically plausible, and there's no evidence for it.
Right. They're only statistics available, and they doesn't fit 100%. So it's not science what school medicine is. It's only hypothetical thing. And also, I wanted to mention that with those metastases, that usually the patient who suffered from any cancer will then start to get lung cancer. So this is also evidence because lung refers to a death fear, which is mostly coming from the diagnosis shock, and also statistically, it's an evidence from the school medicine that lung cancer is the so-called last cancer before the patients die, because it's just they fear of their life, and this refers to the lung.
So that's really interesting to think about when you really understand GNM and you really see that every type of symptom that you have, there is brain involvement. You could almost say that every person who's had some kind of symptom has, quote, had a brain tumor. But the thing is you'll never find it, because unless you're having neurological symptoms, no one's ever going to look at your brain. If you're having stomach pains and, you're suffering from IBS, no one's going to say, oh, well, let's look at their brain too. But there is going to be some level of brain involvement for every single symptom that a person experiences, because you can't have tissue changes at the organ level without having brain involvement. The brain is the mediator. So I think just realizing that, because we do think that, oh my goodness, a brain tumor is such a serious and horrible thing, but really it's just a normal consequence of some type of conflict shock. It's not any worse than, having a runny nose. The body is responding to information that it received, and it's going through its normal biological process.
Right, and as you said, the school medicine is only looking on one level, and from the German medicine perspective, we got actually 3 levels which are acting synchronously. So they are looking only at the organ's perspective, that there's something growing or multiplying, right? And as you said, there's always a correlation to the brain, but also to the psyche, as you said before. So in conflict activities, the patients have the patient thinks a lot of the conflict, has cold hands, no appetite, stuff like that, doesn't sleep. So this is also a level which can be used as determine whether someone is conflict active. Or then in the resolution phase, the patient will become very warm, or warm hands will be there. There will be very good appetites, sleeping a lot, and so forth. So also from this level, you can determine which phases someone is in.
Yeah, and so I wanted to talk a little bit just about headaches, because headaches are such a common problem. I had headaches all throughout being a teenager. My mom had headaches chronically and migraines. And, headaches, simply put, is, not enough space in the cranium. There's pressure occurring because there's healing going on. So during the first half of the healing phase, when that brain impact swells up with water, essentially, that edema, that fluid, that healing fluid is creating pressure within the head. And so a person can even kind of have an idea, like whether the location of the head that their headache occurs. So if it's like above, like in the forehead on the right-hand side versus above the ear on the left-hand side, you can have an idea of the tissue area that's in healing, which is another interesting factor when it comes to understanding what's going on in your body at a given time.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Now, a migraine is when it involves the meninges. And so the meninges are the tissues, the protective tissues surrounding the brain. And so if you have a certain type of conflict that's affecting a certain area of the brain, so say somewhere in the cerebral cortex, so if you have an issue with the thyroid duct, so a powerlessness or conflict, the pharyngeal ducts, if you have a frontal fear conflict, bronchial mucosa, laryngeal mucosa, the visual cortex, if you're having a conflict in one of those regions of the cerebral cortex, and during the healing, the meninges get involved, and the meninges can cause that extremely, when they are swollen, that extremely severe, horrible, head-splitting, terrible type of headaches. But again, that is simply a sign that the body isn't healing. But most people, because they don't understand tracks and triggers, they don't understand the initiating conflict, they just say, oh, every so often I get a migraine, or once a month, or certain times of year, or when this stressful thing happens, I get a migraine. But they don't see the connection between what was going on in their life, the tracks and triggers that they might have been exposed to. And so that for a person, if you're out there listening and you have chronic headaches or you have chronic migraines, there is something for you to discover about the migraines, about the pattern, about what happens. And it's not simply about, just avoiding the food. the best recommendation would be to let's discover the conflict that is getting reactivated again and again, causing you to continually have this swelling in your brain during the healing phase. And so I think that a headache is a really, clear indication that you've got some type of conflict that is continually getting reactivated and has not been resolved yet.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing for me is if we want to experience or get to the bottom of those triggers and tracks, might be helpful to make a journal of the symptoms you have and when do you have them and what you experienced in that day or what you ate during the day. So that helps you to think of all the circumstances where the symptom occur and might help you to find out what's really the initial trigger was.
Yeah, journaling is extremely helpful during the conflict discovery process to see, what is going on with me when I have a migraine versus when I don't. And I think the fact that the migraine occurs during the healing phase, there's enough time that lapses that a lot of people, if they don't know what to look for, they're not seeing the connections. And so they say, oh, when I eat this certain food, maybe they understand a connection between eating a certain food and a migraine, but not necessarily the thought process, not necessarily the initiating conflict that's kind of operating in the background of their mind. And that's one of the wonderful things about the GNM work and about the things that you discover. It's really a process of self-understanding. Who am I? Why do I respond to things the way that I do? What happened to me in my past that's causing me to experience myself, the world, and other people in this particular way? And so when you understand yourself in that way, it all begins to it just all makes so much sense. That's what I love about German New Medicine is it's like, oh, no wonder my body responded that way. I was thinking about this. This was causing me to be in a conflict active mode. My hands were cold. When I think about this, I was listening to my body, and then I got around friends that I really enjoy being around, and I felt really good, and I was really relaxed, and the next day I had the worst headache. And so when you start to see the pattern and you really understand the law of two phases and how the body responds to being in conflict versus when the healing occurs, you really the bigger picture starts to make so much sense. It stops feeling so random and arbitrary, like you can't get a grasp or understand it. And you start to say, oh, wow, this is totally understandable. And you can almost predict it. You're like, oh, I'm feeling really good. And yesterday I was really nervous about that. And you can kind of say, oh, I might have some symptoms. And that just kind of puts your mind at ease, even though the symptoms can be severe and intense. I mean, a headache's never going to feel good, but at least you're not scared of the headache on top of having the pain of the headache.
Right, yeah, exactly right. Pain or actually fear, fear is actually, taken away with this knowledge, which is super great, which is awesome, with knowing about the German New Medicine. And also living that discovery is also, just wonderful. And then also observing special symptoms on other people around you, and then sometimes also ask when they have certain issues or pain. I just ask them, do you have this and this a couple of days ago? And then usually they ask me, why do you want to know it? I mean, mostly it's really something what happened a few days ago, and now they're having this back pain or whatever, something at work happened. So it's really amazing to live this experience, this discovery.
Yeah, it is. It's so freeing. You really overcome fear of being ill. It's totally just a curiosity thing. Like you said, you ask other people, when they've had something going on, and the more you get exposed to it, the more you see it at play in your own life, in the lives of other people. You really stop fearing sickness, disease, and symptoms. And that is one of the greatest freedoms that anyone can have, because fear of illness, fear of sickness, fear of death is such a huge fear for so many people. because they've lost family members to illnesses in the past. And so they kind of live in sort of a semi-constant state of fear of symptoms. And when you're free from that, that's such a joy, because you don't have to concern yourself. You don't have to freak out if your child has a fever. You don't have to freak out, if you are feeling unwell, because it's simply a response to what's been going on in your life. And so thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I think we should definitely do this again in the future on other topics. Your insights and your story is wonderful to hear, to share with everyone. Any parting words, anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And tomorrow we have another regular table here in the city. Oh, actually, the city next to where I'm living. So every month we have this, and we catch up new and new ideas and new experiences. So I'd love to have more of these podcasts with you and just talk about more new stuff, maybe new discoveries in this area, and just living the German new medicine. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, and if you'd like to interact with Matt, he does answer questions and help out in the German New Medicine Self-Healing Support Group. So he is really wonderful to have in there, because he's connected with a lot of people in Germany. And you learn from. Can you tell us a little bit about who you've learned German New Medicine from, who you train with?
Was Helmut Piller. He was actually together with Hammer on a long trip. Let's say his daughter was having a big tumor in the body, and there was a lot of news stories in 1995. I was very young at that age, so I don't know, but there were a lot of news stories and how bad the parents were, how they told, and he's giving now seminars ever since. He's actually the official person who was from Hammer, who's spreading the idea and the discoveries in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So he's German speaking. And I was at his seminar a couple of weeks ago, so he's a very good guy. He's also doing online courses in German. So he's I think one of the most experienced guys. He's not a doctor as well. He's not a therapist. He's having so much experience that it's always good to learn from him. So this is the go-to contact for me here in the German area.
Excellent. So for our German listeners, if you are in the area, try to hook up with the seminars, the conferences, the meetup groups that they're doing in Germany, and to get connected with people who are living the lifestyle, because over there it isn't necessarily legal, I've heard, to practice publicly German New Medicine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's insurance type of thing, right? I mean, you can practice it, but if one of 1,000 patients die, you're in jail, right? But on the other side is the school medicine practitioner is one. If one is surviving the cancer out of 1,000, nothing's happening to them. So
exactly.
Again, it's not completely illegal, but if someone is dying, then you're screwed, right? Basically, that's why no one is actively promoting that he's the therapist. But there are obviously some in the areas here.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about standard of care. You can follow standard of care with 1,000 patients and all 1,000 of them die, but you don't get in trouble because you followed standard of care. But if you went outside of standard of care, and did something different, 999 of the patients could survive, and the one that died, you'd be in jail because you didn't follow standard of care. You did something outside the norm, and so you're in big trouble. And so that's that's the amazing thing that you can. And that's really the thing, is follow your own understanding. And that's the thing about GNM, is you can be your own doctor. When you understand yourself and you understand your body, and as long as you're having symptoms that aren't too incredibly severe, which is pretty rare, I wouldn't say that most people will have to worry about, huge epicrisis that is potentially life-threatening. Obviously, it is a possibility. And that's why, you should work with somebody who knows the potential of, say, a heart attack or something. But for the most part, with general everyday conflicts and symptoms, you could take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. There's no one between you and your health. No pill, no doctor. So your responsibility. We have to learn to be responsible again for our body and for ourselves. That's the main message.
Yes, it is, and it's incredible. Well, thank you again so very much for your time, and I think we'll be doing another one of these very soon.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.